Okay, hello everyone. So we just had a riveting discussion with Taylor and Monica, and now we are going to enter a discussion with Justin Hodge, who many of you have met before. And I actually want to let Justin introduce himself before we get started.
Well, everybody, thanks for being here. My name is Justin Hodge. I am a clinical assistant professor at the University of Michigan School of Social Work, where I primarily teach our classes on policy and political social work. I help design our curriculum. Our students are now able to take a major that's called the Policy and Political Social Work Pathway. I'm also the Washtenaw County Commissioner for the 5th District. So if you're familiar with Washtenaw County geography, that's Ypsilanti Township and Augusta Township. So I'm happy to talk about both of those experiences and what led me to get engaged in policy and political work and how you can do that as well. For our students that are not macro focused, you'll be interested to know that most of my professional background before getting into this was clinical social work. So I used to do child and family therapy for a number of years, case management for kids and adults with developmental disabilities, did some clinic coordination for kids in crisis. So I did a lot of that work before shifting over into doing this work now as a professor and as county commissioner.
I see we have a couple of UMich graduates as well. That's amazing. So the first question I think is going to be obvious, but it's really, I think, what a lot of us are interested in. I know personally, me as a student, I'm really interested to hear because I want to have a career in this, is what does a political social work career look like? What are the pros and cons, and what was kind of your experience entering this field?
Yeah, I think that can look a lot of different ways. I mean, one thing that I always want to tell my students and professional social workers is that there is space for social workers to be engaged in policy and political work, regardless of what your day job is. So for a lot of you, you may want to spend your day job doing either something macro focused or something specifically policy and political focused, or maybe not. Maybe you're interested in doing, being an executive director of a nonprofit or doing on the ground clinical work. All that is fantastic. It's fine. You should do it. But you should be able to work in some amount of policy and political work in there. So just to give you a couple of examples, if you're going that route where you want it to be your day job, and you like, let's say you really like policy and you like politics, you might find yourself applying for policy analyst positions at think tanks, working for elected officials, typically at the state or congressional level. You could be working at advocacy organizations, doing some of that, campaign planning, or supporting those efforts or getting that policy information out there. Positions like that might look like running town halls or informational sessions. There are even some think tanks that are both like think and do, where they do the thinking, the policy research, but then they do the doing, where they're engaging community in that work. So those are some options that you might want to explore, and happy to talk more about that. If you want your day job to look like that, of course, running for office, which is my preference, is to get more social workers to be doing that. I'm really excited that I've had a former student run for office and be successful in the last campaign cycle. And I've had other students that are going to be doing that very soon, I believe. Some of them that are on this call right now. And what else? If you're in a clinical social work position or something that's not necessarily directly related to you doing policy work, something that you should do, and I'd say do it right now, maybe after the call is over, but look up what some local board and commissions in your community look like that you could get appointed to. So to share a bit about my experience with that, I got a lot of my policy experience by serving on local boards and commissions at the city level and at the county level. So I, for a little while, served on a city commission that was focused on promoting civil rights, addressing civil rights complaints in the city, and advising city council on social policy. And in doing that, I was able to draft the policy that made the city recognize Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. So like being in those kinds of positions, you can really have a hand in crafting policy.
Just noticed that you have the political social work textbook, and that's actually the textbook I used in my undergrad when I was starting to get into political social work.
Awesome. Shannon, I think, is on the call right now. It's a fantastic book. I'm sure we'll share that out when we send the information, like follow-up information. People should get the book.
Yes, for sure. And Shannon, if you're watching this, I would recommend putting a link to your textbook because I learned a lot from it. And I'm really happy to see that it's in your background as well.
It's always there. You gotta such a good book. You really got to display it when you can.
Yes, and also how to be an anti-racist. I had the opportunity to hear Ibram Kendi speak, so that was really great too. And I actually wanted to hear more about your campaigning experience and what that was like, and how you think as a social worker, campaigning would actually kind of look different for us, maybe than just what a normal person would be campaigning for. And if I don't know if you ever went to campaign school, but I know that's a really big institution that helps social workers run for office as well.
Yeah, I think campaign school is fantastic. I spoke at one event and then helped with Shannon and a team be able to do one in Michigan. So highly recommend if you have the opportunity to do that. And I know they're doing it online now too. So that's a great way for you to get additional experience in addition to what you're doing here. One thing I think will look different with social workers that are campaigning is, we have a code of ethics. And there are going to be some people that are going to be engaged in politics or really in anything that are going to be operating from a different code of ethics or not a code of ethics. So that's something that I think will come through in the way that we campaign. And of course, the issues that we choose to focus on are going to come through in our campaign. So for me, when I ran, and I'm going to have to run again because I have to run for re-election every 2 years. But so much of my experience as a clinical social worker working in a community mental health system and getting that kind of county experience, county government experience, that informed how I shaped my campaign and the issues that we wanted to focus on. And when I ran in 2020 and was successful, we focused on opportunity for all and thinking about the areas in our county that don't have the same opportunities to thrive and be successful as other parts of the county. And a lot of that, like, for example, people tend to think about Washtenaw County and think, okay, the University of Michigan is there. They have all these great resources. Everybody must be rich. It's not true. It's not true at all. Washtenaw County is actually one of the most economically segregated regions in the entire country. And there are pockets of concentrated poverty in different parts of the county. And a lot of that is in my district. So thinking about how can we make it our county a place where everybody has the opportunity to be healthy and to build wealth and to be safe, that's what we focused on. And being able to use my experience as a social worker working in that area was what informed how we approached the campaign.
I also just want to apologize. My internet's unstable, so I'm like coming in and out. But thank you for that. And I was also interested to hear, in your time, has there been any moments where you've really seen, like, if I wasn't a social worker, like this would have been difficult for me, whether it's like navigating different conversations with different elected officials or really putting that social work perspective into use that you think would have been absent if you weren't there and your social work perspective wasn't there?
Yeah, we get so much training in a variety of things as a social worker that it might feel like to students, by the time you get to the end of your program, you wonder how much expertise you got in any one particular area. To that, I always say one of the things that you should be developing expertise in is your approach to promoting social justice, and that you should be getting that and some skill in how you implement that across all the different domains that you get training in. But one of the things that I think makes social workers the best and most qualified people to hold elected office is that training in all those different domains. So, for example, I would want my elected official to have some experience in program evaluation, community organizing, community engagement, management of human services, policy, of course, and how to interact in an effective interpersonal way. Like, I would want my elected official to have all those skills, but I mean, who's getting that kind of training besides us? It's nobody. So in thinking about that, that's been really useful for me as an elected official, and prior to that as somebody in politics, is that one, the interpersonal stuff is really useful. There's a lot of conflict. People are really passionate about their ideas, or people have ulterior motives that bleed off into your interactions. I have spent a lot of my time doing conflict resolution, which has been my social work training has been very useful for that. So for the interpersonal practice focused social workers watching this, don't think about, well, I got into the program, I've been focused on interpersonal practice, but now I'm interested in policy. Is it too late for me? No, it's not at all. Like, those interpersonal practice skills are really, really useful. I think the research shows that as social workers that are elected use those interpersonal practice skills more than they use the macro skills. Not to say that those are not useful, because they're very useful, but you're dealing with a lot of relationship dynamics all the time. You're dealing with people that are either frustrated about something or may disagree about something. So leaning on those skills has been very useful for me. I'll say has been useful for me since I took office in January. Like, I have done a lot of conflict resolution.
And before I get to Monica's question, I just want to say that's so true. I worked in Legislator Kara Han's office, who's in Long Island, and she's a social worker who's in elected office. And when I say it's really difficult to navigate difficult conversations, and she's managed to do it because she's a social worker, I really see the value of having social workers in office. And anyone who's watching this right now, I really encourage you to run for office. Do not think you're unqualified, because you probably are way more qualified than any other candidate. So go for it. And check out the link that Shannon sent. And then Monica had asked, what is the best way for social workers to fundraise for a successful campaign?
Well, so that's one of those questions where, whether you're a social worker or not, there are certain things about campaigning and politics that are going to be the same. So you always, there's training around how the fundraising works. I mean, you're going to start with people that you know, and then go out from those connections. Like, you think about 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon. You got to start with your closer connections and you move out from there. I think something that's a challenge for social workers is the empathy thing, right? It's hard to ask for money. And the advice I have around that is you have to be able to separate you're not asking for money for you, right? You're not asking somebody to donate to the campaign so you can go spend that money and want to go to the movies or something. That's not what you're doing it for. You're doing it. And I think the terminology that I've always used for myself and to try to get me to be better about it is that you're asking for someone to invest in your vision of whatever, of a Washtenaw County where everybody has the opportunity to thrive and be successful. That wasn't rehearsed at all. It's practiced. So you're asking for an investment in your vision in a future that people will believe in, and people will believe in you. But sometimes you got to ask. So that's the challenge. I think that's the hardest thing about fundraising.
Thank you. And I remember a tip in campaign school was, if you're going to ask someone for money, take a sip of water, so you don't just feel that necessity to break that silence, because I think as social workers, a lot of us struggle asking for money. And I remember when I heard about fundraising, I found it really difficult to think, oh, I have to ask this person for money. That's insane. So yes, thank you for that. And then Joe has saying we encounter this in the nonprofit world as well. Yes, the ask is always hard, but the ask is also the most important part. I would ask, as a social worker and someone who's in elected office, how do you communicate with your constituents and the people you represent? And how do you think it may be different from any other elected official?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, some of this is different because I took office during the pandemic. So if we weren't in a pandemic, I would be doing a lot more things that I'm not able to do. Like, I would have coffee hours. I mean, you always hear about elected officials doing that. I'm trying to think of it like a nice one, like Juice with Justin. Like, there's a juice bar in my district, Juice with Justin. I would be doing that if we could. But a lot of my engagement right now has been on social media. That was something that I think helped us win. It was integral to our success, was how good we were on social media, and always able to and willing to interact with constituents on all of the platforms. So sometimes I get Facebook messages and from a constituent that has some sort of concern. That's something to be involved with, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram, Twitter. Get a lot of interaction on Twitter. And, these Zoom meetings we have a really good neighborhood watch system in one of the townships that I represent. So making sure that you're showing up on Zoom in those spaces. One, because it might not necessarily be time to have a conversation with somebody there, but they'll see you and get to know you. Because the odds are, probably many of you have never heard of a county commissioner before I started talking about it, right? And neither have many of my constituents. People just know there's a thing I want done. Government should probably do this thing. Who's the government person that's supposed to help with it? Right? Okay. So then you got to help people navigate to the right government person to do it. And whether that's me as county commissioner, or if it's a colleague in another elected office, you got to be able to help direct people. So I think that being willing to do that, responding well when you do have those kinds of interactions with people. Like, I get comments from constituents all the time about things I can't help with, but that doesn't mean, hey, not my problem. No, it means continue. I continue doing the same way you would work if in a social work position. And that's the way I've approached it.
COVID had made communicating different, because I know for me to contact my local city council person, it's become even harder, because if I call their office, they're not available. I can email them, but the emails come back late. So how has COVID maybe changed that for you?
Yeah, I made my just phone number available out there, so I get phone calls, text messages. That's easier. I mean, and calling people on the phone, people don't expect to get sometimes a call from an elected official. So when that happens, I mean, I think it lets people know that you're really serious about trying to do something.
I really wish more elected officials were like that, but that's actually really amazing. And another question I had really has to relate with, I know in my experience working in Long Island and in government, I tended to be the only brown person there, the only like Asian person there, the only hijabi there, and navigating that space has been difficult, but also interesting at the same time. But it can be disheartening. Like I'll have people like mention that like, oh, your hijab should be a certain color to appear more professional, or people will kind of just tokenize me from my experiences. And I was wondering how, as someone who isn't white, how that experience has been for you in your time running for office as well, because I think it's a conversation and a topic most of us don't hear about, and I think it would be valuable to hear someone's experience on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, those are all very real issues that you're going to encounter when you're running for office, or even if you're not running for office and you're just engaged in that same kind of environment. And I think it's one reason why it's so helpful to ask that question is that you got to have these conversations in a proactive way so you can be prepared to deal with it. When you're not prepared to deal with it, it hurts a lot more and it's a lot harder. We got a lot of attacks during the campaign that I did not anticipate. We got a lot of race-based attacks and a bunch of other stuff. And it was not pleasant. I can look back on it now and kind of sad laugh at it. But at the time it was very bothersome. So having, the people that you can lean on for support, and because just tell them ahead of time, some things are probably going to be said about me that are not going to be nice to make me feel bad. You got to be able to carve off that time, plan ahead to be able to have time to talk to, people that you care about for that. And something else that's helpful is people say mean things about people on social media because they can get away with it. What's good to do is have like your crew, maybe not people that like share your last name because then you're gonna get caught. But you got to have like the people that can come in there and counter that kind of thing. Another tip would be you don't need to read everything people say about you on the internet. You got somebody else do that, right? And then there could be a response, but you don't got to read everything. I mean, because people are going to have opinions, or people might express ideas that they don't even believe but are hurtful and aim to hurt you. You just got to be aware of that. I think in something that I see a lot with my students, and when we have discussions about that and about voter suppression, people do bad things on purpose. And I think sometimes social workers have a hard time believing that. Like, well, no, maybe if they only had different information, they wouldn't be so terrible. No, some people are just really terrible. And I think you need to acknowledge that that's going to be the case and plan accordingly. So making sure that you have support, bring people with you to meetings, right? I made the mistake early on and because we were campaigning before COVID hit. Don't go to events by yourself. It's just not good logistically. Like things might come up. Everybody's gonna want to talk to you. Go with at least one person. So always bring somebody with you, so you feel like you have support. Bring more than one person if you can. So that's some advice there.
Good advice for sure. And then I see Joe had asked, how do you deal with attack? Is it a they go low, we go high strategy, or do you just not acknowledge the attack strategies of your opponents? And I also want to recognize Simon's question, and we'll get to that after.
Okay. Joe, that's a good one. If you want to see how I respond to attacks, maybe you should tune into some Board of Commissioners meetings because there's sometimes we get some attacks there. I think it depends on the attack. So something that happened during the campaign, and we don't know exactly who did it, but somebody lit one of our yard signs on fire. And, we share that on social media and talk about how like this should not be representative of a community and all that good stuff. But the frustrating thing about it is that got more activity, like that social media post got more activity than all my really positive posts, my post about here are some policy things I'd like to achieve, like really well thought out stuff. No, but people like the negativity sometimes. So I would say don't engage with it too much. But sometimes things are going to be said that are going to be, that you might need to respond to. So there are sometimes comments at Board of Commissioner meetings that either are like a clear misrepresentation of the facts, or just not even a representation of the facts at all. Since we live in a very mis and disinformation age now, sometimes you do have to address those things. And I would say don't attack back the person, but just express the idea and make clear what the fact or the facts are.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like most people do get more excited and more like inclined to read posts and messages if there's tea or drama in it. And if it's great if you can use it to your benefit. Yeah, sadly, negative news does go more viral. And then Simon had asked, and I think we had touched on it a little bit before as well, is what is unique about social workers in politics. And could you please expand on why I'm assuming social work is useful in politics when compared to other professions? And I really like the last one. How does social work prepare you for office?
Yes. Okay. I will answer all those. I say social work prepares. I think it's the best preparation for serving an elected office. One, because our profession is focused on social justice. I left this out of my last answer. Last time I answered a similar question, so I'm going to work it in here. Is that I would want my elected officials doing things with social justice at the forefront of their minds when they do it. So, in addition to the excellent training that we get in a wide variety of topics, like policy, politics, program evaluation, all of that. I want to be able to approach that work, and I want colleagues to be able to approach that work with the intention of promoting social justice. So that's something that's unique to our training, that sets us apart from other fields. And something else that sets us apart is, like, you might do interpersonal practice work as a social worker, and you might have colleagues that have a master's in counseling or a PhD in psychology or whatever else. But just like your approach to therapy is going to be different than their approach is going to be, because we focus more on the environment and things more globally. That's where that social work value is coming from, because we might be able to look at a problem in a way that someone from another field might look at it and think this is the solution, but that's because their view is like more narrow. We have a broader view where we could see, if we're trying to think of a solution to a particular problem, how might it affect this other aspect of the system? And that's something that we can bring to the table that is, I think, lost in many other fields.
And it actually makes me wonder, for students who are to a school that maybe doesn't have such a strong policy specialization or doesn't have professors like you who are so passionate about political social work, how can they get more engaged with the idea of becoming a political social work, or like what are some resources that they can look to like learn more about it?
Yeah, so I'm going to say you're doing the first step right now, which is coming to an event like this. And it's great that you were able to attend this. There are other events like Campaign School. I'm going to drop in the chat a training program that I designed that it's open to everyone, non-social workers included. I've had a number of non-social workers do it. And it gives you a lot of political social work training. It's a self-paced online program that you can engage in. So I highly recommend participating in those and seeking those resources elsewhere. But also, if your school doesn't have that particular thing that you're looking for in the curriculum, they may be willing to give you some funding to pursue it elsewhere. Like, so for those of you that are attending this event, and because hopefully your school is thinking, in lieu of you having policy in this program, we'll pay for you to go to this event. They may do that for other events as well, or other trainings. So I would say look to those, look to free trainings as well, but reach out to people that that care about this stuff. Like, this is an open invitation for people to reach out to me, for me to have conversations with you. I don't care where you're at. And I talk to people all around the country and the world about this kind of stuff. Clearly, I'm very passionate about it. And if you reach out, I'm happy to talk to you. And I'm sure many of the other speakers that you engaged with throughout this event would be willing to talk with you as well.
Appreciate that you're so open, and you can also pop in your email or link or anything if they do want to reach out to you. And thank you, Joseph, for saying great questions. If anyone else has any questions in the chat, I would really welcome you to put that in there as well. One thing I'm really curious about is what was your thought process when you created your own, because you mentioned you created your own curriculum at UMich, and then what did you feel was really important to emphasize in your curriculum? And what do you think students who are interested in this should really take away? Because although I've never had like an official political social work class, I feel like because I've attended so much of a variety, I've like pieced together a few things, but I would be really interested to know what you felt was really important.
Yeah, so I thought about, I have a co-lead that helps with the curriculum, development too. We have, and I'll tell you about what our pathway, the major, looks like. So my thinking with it was, we're limited by how many credits we can require students to take. So for our major, because, as we talked about, you have to learn about all these different domains of practice within social work. Our students are required to take 12 credits for their major. They have 14 elective credits, so they could take a second one, or they could do a deeper dive into their desired one, or they could just use it for whatever they want to use it for. Knowing that I can't really make anybody do something more than the 12 credits, my thinking was we need a class that's really focused on policy and is preparing students for jobs in policy. Because we're going to have students, this may be speaking to you right now, not you specifically, but someone in the audience, that you might really like policy, but you don't really like the politics piece of things, and that's fine. Then we also I wanted us to have a class that is focused on politics, because you might like politics, but you're not really, a policy person, and that's fine. Then, of course, there might be the people that really like both, which is great. So I designed those two classes, and then my co-curricular lead thought about, okay, well, how do we prepare students with the theory and the research portion of things? So what are we going to do there? So it resulted in 3 different 3-credit required classes. One of them is a class that my partner designed that's the theories and principles of socially just policy. So the idea with that class is it gives you a background on different conceptions of justice, and how can you look at a policy and decide whether or not it's socially just, and like what are the criteria that you're using to determine whether or not this is socially just, and how do you articulate that in an argument with someone, not a backhand argument, just like if you're having an exchange of ideas. And then, so for the 2 classes I designed that are required, there's a policy analysis class, which focuses on giving students a variety of frameworks to do a policy analysis, with the ultimate goal with the class being, I always tell students in this class, if you like the stuff that you're doing, like the assignments I make you do in this class, you might want to be a policy analyst. That might be a career path for you. So I always structure the assignments to be practically useful. They're not, like I always say to students, it's not for me. Of course, I have to grade it. But it's designed for someone in the community. So I always encourage students to engage with a legislator, an advocacy organization, someone, and say, hey, I'm really interested in your work, or I have to do an assignment. What would be something that would have practical value to you? And I want them to do a policy brief, and then some second deliverable. Typically, that second deliverable would be a 1-page fact sheet. It could be designing or writing up testimony to give on an issue, something that they can actually go deliver on. And I've had students have that work used by state senators, for example. One student I can think of in particular wrote a really excellent policy brief and a fact sheet about a regulation with Michigan Medicaid that wouldn't require a legislative change. This would have required a regulatory change. So connected her with one of with our state senator, and our state senator went, and it took a little while because many things take a while, but he actually made the change recommended by the student. And then I've had a number of students use the work in that class as writing samples for when they apply to policy analysis jobs. So that was my thinking with that course. The political social work course is designed to give students, it's tough to cover so many things in a semester, but to really give them an overview and somewhat of a deeper dive into the various ways that you can engage in political social work. So, of course, I use portions of this book right here, that book, as well as other resources, and thinking about how students can, from promoting voting rights and engaging underrepresented communities, to themselves thinking about running for office, and giving them that background. So that's the thinking with that course. So then to circle it back, because you're like, okay, well, Justin, that's 3 + 3 + 3, that's 9. Well, but the last three can be used for electives that we've designed that are policy or political focused. For example, I teach a simulation course where students will role play as a policymaker, as a stakeholder, or someone from an advocacy organization, as we go through and we look at the topic changes. I teach it on different topics. So most recently, I taught the course on trying to combat the opioid epidemic in Michigan. So I took a bill that I think was introduced in Maine, made some modifications to the bill so it would work in Michigan, and then assigned students different characters, and they played those characters. And the characters they played were real people. So in this scenario, this bill would go to the Health Policy Committee and the Michigan State Legislature. In real life, it would. So then the characters in the scenario are the actual legislators that are on that committee right now. So then some of them have to play as them, and then behave as that character throughout. And then there are other real characters. So that's an example of one of the electives. And then so to circle back to the theories and principles class, the thinking that we put into that one is that students are going to want to sometimes take policy courses outside of the School of Social Work, which I really encourage to get that interdisciplinary education. But what I frequently find with students is that if they take let's say they take a class in the public policy school, and they're the only social worker there, and they're the only one talking about the social justice implications of whatever policies they're talking about, it's pretty easy to feel lonely and stifled, and it's challenging if you're going to be challenged with arguments that maybe you weren't prepared for. So circling back to the theories and principles class, not only is that useful for the social work education piece of things, but it's supposed to prepare students to be able to take policy courses outside of social work and be able to keep that social justice perspective at the front of any arguments they have, so they stay grounded in it. It's a long answer. That was a long answer.
And I'm thinking, wow, these sounds like amazing classes, and your students must be incredibly lucky, because it sounds like something I would have loved to take. But seriously, no, it's really great. And I think it really ties into just what Bianca had asked. What is your definition of a political social worker? Because it feels like there's a lot of ways to get engaged. And I do want to just connect this to another question of what other areas in the political realm do you think we also need more social workers in? So beyond just running for office.
Yeah, that's a great couple of questions that you put together there. I think about how do you define yourself as a political social worker? I would say that if you're a social worker that is going to put serious consideration into how politics affects our lives and the lives of the people that we serve as social workers, you can call yourself a political social worker. You don't have to be somebody who's has a significant portion of their job is committed to politics. I'm a county commissioner. I would call myself a political social worker. I think it's my title on Twitter. But you don't have to be an elected official. You don't have to be somebody that's doing that full time. Like if you're a person that is what you are committed to doing, call yourself a political social worker. We need to spread the word. And what are some other areas where we should get social work involvement in? Of course, running for office is always good, right? But what else? Because not everybody's going to run for office. It's not for everybody. I understand that. But working on campaigns is useful, whether you're doing that as a volunteer or whether you're doing that in a paid capacity. And that's not just for candidate campaigns, right? So in Michigan, we're lucky in that we're one of the most gerrymandered states, but we're lucky because we're not going to be soon, because we were able to get a nonpartisan redistricting commission and an advancement in voting rights thanks to a couple of organizations that pushed a ballot initiative. So that might be something you want to do in your state, can you push a ballot initiative, work with that kind of an organization doing that, start your own organization that's going to push a ballot initiative so you can create your own law. I mean, get your voters to vote for it. Now, I know not all states have ballot initiatives. There are a few that don't. But if you're in one that does, that's a great way for you to have a direct impact on what the laws in your state look like. So that kind of engagement, engaging with advocacy organizations, whether it's, the work that we do here at CRISP, the work that the NASW does, get on those email lists and actually read them, because usually there's valuable information in there about policies that may be relevant to you as a social worker or the field, and engage with your elected officials. I mean, that's a lower bar, but engage with your elected officials. Know who your elected officials are. You got to know who they are first before you can engage with them. So get to know who they are, and then get to know them as a person. Like in my previous talk, when I had the smaller group, we talked a lot about how so much of this is relationship based. You get onto develop a relationship with an elected official, you're in a much better position to influence policy. And that doesn't have to be your job, but you can influence policy by having a conversation with an elected official, or people that are in appointed positions. Speaking of appointed positions, become an appointed official. Look at those local, like I mentioned earlier, look at those local boards and commissions, which you can find on your local government and state. There are state appointed commissions you can get on as well. Those can be more challenging if you don't have any of the previous experience, but go to your city, your township, county, and look for somewhere on there that says boards and commissions. And I bet you there's going to be some vacancies on at least a few of them. So get on there. Voter registration. I mentioned that one? No, I don't think I did. Do it all the time. Do voter registration all the time. Because we get into conversations that frequently nonprofits do, worried about, we're afraid to lose our nonprofit status, so we're just going to engage in no political activity. Well, okay, that's not correct. Nonprofits are able to engage in some amount of political activity, but I'm not going to get into that. What I'm just going to talk about is voter registration does not count as political activity. Everybody could be doing voter registration all day long. My dream would be every nonprofit and every government agency would have ask people if they would like to be registered to vote as part of their intake process. So that's something you could be doing. You could be encouraging your field sites, your place of employment, all that to do voter registration. Yeah, the same thing. Engage elected officials, do voter registration. Oh, when it's election time, do some poll work. They're the people that help make democracy happen. And it's very challenging. People that end up working the polls tend to be older. And in the last, cycle with COVID, the most at-risk population were the people that were helping run democracy. It's kind of, come on, we can do it. And you get paid to do it in most places. So do some poll work.
Definitely have to agree. And I just want to add that social work is political, and any work you do, if it's social justice related, will always be something that people will say, oh, it's political, it's too political, I can't. But I think that's the role we play. And I also want to add, I've met a lot of social workers who are chief of staff to a lot of elected officials. I know Annalise, who had won an award yesterday from CRISP, was the chief of staff to Senator Chuck Schumer, and she's been really helping to shape the conversation around loan forgiveness and like helping students through COVID. So like even like joining an elected official's office as a staffer is a really great way to have your influence on the elected official. And yeah, social work is political, and I would encourage everyone to not shy away from that and be resilient in those difficult conversations. Well, the conversation shouldn't be difficult, but oftentimes it is. Yes. And then we have a question from Jacqueline. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. But what spurred your transition from clinical to the political sphere? Was there one particular moment that galvanized you, or was it cumulative?
I think it's a little bit of both. So throughout my time in the MSW program, I became increasingly interested in policy and politics. But I graduated with the intention to do clinical work, and at some point, like to be an engaged social worker, but I was still going to be doing clinical work. But I was working for a community mental health system during the time when our governor and the state legislature slashed the budget to the community mental health system, which resulted in us having to let go of all of our patients that didn't have Medicaid. And it had to happen so swiftly that a lot of people had to be done without a clear transition plan. So and we were one of the CMHs that were not as hard hit. There are other CMHs that people lost their jobs. So seeing that happen and having to be on the end of having to tell people your services are going to be terminated, and I don't really have a good reason why, like a bunch of politicians decided that you don't deserve to have a service. I mean, that's ultimately what it was. So that got me much more engaged.
We have a question that says, how can you help with analyzing campaigns? Rosaline, if you want, you can also further maybe elaborate on that question as well, because I'm interested to know what you mean by analyzing campaigns.
Yeah, please elaborate on the question. We'll take another one because I know we've got that 30-second delay.
Yes. I don't see any other questions right now, but is there anything you would want students to really know and leave with here? And I'm sure you've mentioned it because you've met with so many of them in your sessions, but is there something you would want us to know?
Yeah, the thing that, one lesson would be the most important part about getting involved in politics is showing up. I would say, I'm going to have to crunch the numbers, but I'd say 90% probably showing up. Show up at, if you want to start getting engaged with your local political party, whether that's at the county level or state or somewhere in between, show up to those meetings. You can do it over Zoom right now. Show up to your city council meetings, county commission meetings, give public comment, do all of that. Then people get to know who you are. It gets easier for you to be more engaged because you're showing up. And opportunities can't, come your way unless you're there to receive the opportunity, and that requires you to show up. The other thing that if I had to say something to leave with, we are as social workers totally qualified to do this work. I don't want anybody to feel like they're not. I mean, there may be people that try to make you feel like they're not, but you are totally qualified to do it. And you are totally qualified to do it with just your social work degree. I'll give you an example. I have colleagues that have a social work degree and a dual degree in public policy or something else. And for a little while before I got elected and was still going through the whole, what do I want to do next with my career? I considered doing that too. But then at a certain point, I thought, well, why would I do that? One, and it's the same thing I tell students now, why get a second degree? The only time you should get another degree is if you need the degree to do the thing that you want to do specifically. Otherwise, you're going to be spending a whole bunch of money unnecessarily. And then for me, one of the reasons why I decided not to do it is, no, I'm committed to getting more social workers engaged in politics and policy work. And I want to be a good example of doing that. And for me, part of that is I have my MSW. I don't have another master's degree. So I don't want to hear from students that, well, you can't do it with a social work degree. You can, and you should. If you want to get a dual degree for other purposes, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you not to pursue whatever education you want to pursue, but I don't want you to feel like that's something you have to do. It can be done and it should be done.
Yes to all of that. I really think a lot of people think you have to be a lawyer. I know my parents were under that misconception that to be an elected official, you have to be a lawyer because they understand law. And I have to tell them they only know how to read law. They do not know how to communicate with people. I mean, maybe, but we are like trained to know how to communicate with people, you know, like have empathy and all those important skills. So yes to all of that.
I'll jump in back on that too. That's, I think, something that's a barrier for people is that they think that I need to know these things, otherwise I shouldn't run. No, like after you win, you got plenty of time to get up to speed on a lot of things, and people are going to be there to help you do it. I'll give you an example. So I won my election in November, and then after that, I did what's called New County Commissioner School. Then, I mean, I knew a lot about it because I'd done a lot of homework ahead of time, what it took to be county commissioner, but then there are training programs designed for specific offices that you get to participate in. And that's something I think that doesn't get talked about enough, that I think a lot of, for social workers in particular, because we're so focused on, I think, not wanting to make things worse, that we don't want to get into a position and not know what to do unless we understand it totally. It's you cannot understand this kind of work totally until you're actually in the office. And then to go back to the lawyer thing, we have a lawyer. Like, you're going to have a lawyer when you get into some of these positions. I ask lawyer questions all the time to make sure I'm not doing anything illegal, or that like one of my ideas will fit within the bounds of current policy or law. And I mean, it's not my responsibility to know that. That's why you hire a lawyer for that.
See, Rosalind had also elaborated saying with analyzing campaigns, more like assisting with helping campaigns to have a successful outcome.
Yeah. So how do you go about doing that? I think that's where you get a lot of this political social work experience. And the best way to, like, I like to learn hands-on. So my recommendation, if you want to get skill in that, would be to get engaged with campaigns when it's campaign season. And learn what you can from being a part of the campaign. But, you know, campaigns end at a certain point, right? I mean, your candidate or your ballot initiative wins or loses. But to really stay engaged with politics all year round, I'm a strong proponent of being engaged in with political parties. So I served in a leadership capacity on our county Democratic Party for a number of years. And that was a great way to, one, get experience to start building those leadership skills, also get to know people in the area and be able to make some change and have some influence on what is important to the party. So that's another thing. And that's all year round. Like, if you want to be engaged all year round, get involved with your political party of choice.
Yes, for sure. And Jill, I'm going to have my colleague Nat help you out with that. And then Tiana had said, so many people are encouraging us to go into office, but even in your state, there was a plot to kidnap Governor Whitmer. And in Michigan, twice during the pandemic, the Capitol was under siege. And at the national level, the insurrection here in Washington, D.C. There seems to be so much risk to self and family. I wonder how my MSW could carry me through this. And that is such a valid concern for sure, because safety is going to be at risk.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a really nice answer like some of my answers are for that. I mean, my answer to that is, you just went through, many of you just were part of a discussion about threats to democracy and how can social work save democracy. And that was a big focus of yesterday's events as well, which if you didn't watch them, they're on YouTube, you could watch that. A lot of what you're talking about there are direct threats to democracy. So how can, what can you do with your MSW there? Well, your MSW, being a social worker, that's the answer right there, is can social work save democracy? Standing up to those threats. I mean, just backing down from those kinds of things happening is what the people that, attacked our Capitol want to have done. They want to rule through fear. They want to tear down our democracy. And us social workers and others have to stand up for that. Is there risk involved? Certainly, yeah. There's a lot of risk involved with a lot of things. And it's a personal choice that you have to make. I know that my family has concerns about me with a lot of this. Yeah, I'll tell you too. I was sworn into office on Insurrection Day, so on the 6th, when the terrorists attacked the Capitol. And before, so then like people that aren't following a lot of this see that, and then of course, so my uncle called me, for example, and knew that I was being sworn in that day. He's like, "Do I need to Like, what's going on? I know you guys are doing Zoom for some stuff, but are you gonna have to go in there? And do I need to come there to like make sure you're gonna be safe? I'm like, no, I'm just be in my room doing swearing in via Zoom. But I mean, I don't want people to have to my loved ones to worry about me because I've decided that I want to take my passion for promoting social justice and decide that I think we can do that through politics and be worried about me. But to some extent, that's what I'm opening myself up to. And that is certainly a consideration that you have to make when you think about your involvement in this. But I think with the rise in attacks like that we see and plots to tear down our government and our democracy, that's more of a reason for some of us to have to get involved. And it's fine if that may not be you that has to do it, but support the people that choose to go ahead and do that. So if you get a good social worker that's running for office, or they can't be a social worker, someone else that shares our values pretty closely, please support them in any way you can. Whether that's, donating to their campaign or volunteering on their campaign or being a friend. Like there's value in all of that.
Thank you so much. And then Maureen Sola, and I'm so sorry if I pronounced your name wrong, asked, what are your thoughts on the Family First Prevention Service Act, and are there advocacy reform groups already developed regarding the act? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the act.
I don't know the specifics.
That's okay. I know Angelique had offered to talk about them more offline, so I'd encourage you, Maureen Sola, to connect with Angelique on that.
Nice save, Angelique.
Thank you. And then Simon or Simone had asked, are there updates on having a union for social workers? How might social workers in politics support this? Wow, this is a great question because I really think we should have a union.
That's a great question. I've had some conversations with people more locally interested in trying to start a social work union. I am not aware of any efforts to make that happen, but now would be the time to do it, especially with the bill that the House just passed and there being this increased interest on promoting organized labor. I think that social workers should do that, and people are interested in it. I mean, it's time to get to work in doing it. Something that's happened in Michigan a lot is that the Republicans in the legislature attack the nurses, they attack the teachers, they've attacked the firefighters. And what I always tell my classes is, look, if they're attacking the nurses and the teachers, who do you think is next, right? And we don't have a union. So let's be really thoughtful about that. And how might social workers in politics support this? Well, organizing it, there's a deep and rich history connecting social work and unions. And a lot of that is lost. And I've noticed that a lot of younger social workers that I have in my courses kind of have like an anti-union sentiment. And some of that I think might be because they grew up in a time with a previous governor that we've had that was very anti-union, and maybe things that they heard at home were anti-union. But I would encourage people to look into the history that connects unions and social work and think about maybe that's your political social work activity, is trying to get that going.
So much. And I just want to maybe see if someone else wants to ask one more question, and then we can close out so everyone can get a quick break before our networking session starts. And I know you have been talking for the whole day, so I'm sure you need a break as well. So I'll give a second because I know there's a delay if anyone would want to ask one more question. And for anyone who was supposed to be in Jim Himes' session, I did send his representative a new link. He has not replied to me, so I would just say maybe give it a few minutes. And if he doesn't, I'm so sorry that he did not attend the meeting. But we can hopefully you were able to attend some of the advocacy sessions we had and get some practice lobbying there. And I'll give it like 20 more seconds. If you don't see another question, thank you so much, Justin. I think everyone took away a lot from what you had to share. I took away a lot. I'm so excited to see that you are in elected office, and I hope you run for more offices so I can support you because I'm really interested in your work. And thank you so much for everything you shared today.
Hey, you did an awesome job moderating this. I can't wait for you to run for office so I can support you in that. So keep me posted. And I am serious. Anybody, if you want to have a conversation with me, please feel free to reach out. I will post my email again because there's a lot in the chat going on. You can also Google me, that good old thing. I'm doing pretty good with Google. I think the first 2 pages are me, so that's good.
For sure.
But thank you all for being here. Please stay engaged and consider the conversations we've had about the social work and our place as a field and protecting democracy. I think it's essential to, I think the next the next big thing our
For
field
sure, I
hits on.
agree 100%. And also, Justin Hodge is also on our CRISP website, and he's one of the board directors as well. And I think we should be really honored that he's one of our board directors. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And you can press leave on the top right, and then that would take you off. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone who asked all the questions. I'm so happy to see the chat is so engaged. It makes this so much nicer and easier. And I really do wish I was able to see everyone's faces so we could talk more face to face. But unfortunately on Hopin we can't. Thank you, Shannon and Laura. That's so sweet. I just want to give everyone a 10-minute break because I know we've been going on nonstop with the sessions and the expos. I think there's 10 minutes left. I would recommend checking out Trisha Shimamura's expo and meeting with her and checking out her experience in running for office and seeing if you want to get involved in her campaign as well. And then we'll be starting our networking session. And the way that's going to work is that at 4 o'clock, you can just click on the networking button that you'll see on your left. And then I'll ask to connect to your microphone and camera. And then you can just like I've said it before and I have no other description except for the fact that it's like speed dating. And then you can reach out to Elle or Laura, and Laura's in the chat as well. I see she's on right now for any questions about networking or any guidance if you're having any technical issues. I highly recommend everyone connect their LinkedIn to their user profile so that you can automatically connect onto the team, connect with the LinkedIn to whoever you're meeting. Sorry, I blanked for a second. And then from 5 to 6, we're going to just have a quick debriefing session to hear everyone's feedback, to hear what everyone's experience was like. And then that's going to be the end of Student Advocacy Day. And I just want to say thank you so much. And thank you to our student leadership team for making this possible. And Dr. Lewis for guiding us. And I'll see you in a bit. And at 4 o'clock, there will be nothing on the main stage. I recommend everyone to go into the networking button so that we can all just kind of meet there and start networking, because I think that'll be valuable in whatever field we want to go into. Thank you.